All right, people, let's have a look at this roll between Andreas on the right here and Nick on the left. Andreas probably been training for about 18 months or so at this stage, starting off on the feet here, looking for good hand fighting, which is always good. And now perhaps reaching for that collar tie a little too much and maybe not taking advantage of the fingers in grip that we had before. So what I mean by that is right here you can see that Nick has gone fingers on the inside, which is a common way of looking to arm drag or to potentially elbow pummel towards an underhook. But anytime somebody does that, their elbow is exposed here. So if we can use our right hand, which already has the inside position because we were looking for that collar tie, this is a good opportunity to look to drag that arm across the middle. So always look for arm drags when somebody goes for a fingers inside grip, and now we're trying to walk our partner around and we're reaching for double collar ties, which can be okay, but in general it means that we are a little bit exposed to double legs and single legs, any kind of entry onto our legs there, because we have two elbows away from the hips and we're kind of walking forwards, which isn't letting us use good footwork to use penetration steps and get in on the legs. So here we're kind of reaching with both hands somewhat instinctively, which again isn't a bad idea all the time, but in general I like to lead with one hand first, with either my lead hand being a posting hand or my rear hand being a posting hand, so that I can have one hand defending my legs and looking to hand fight. So we're kind of in a square stance here, which leaves us unable to shoot. So generally having one foot forward will be the best there, but you can see that the hand fight is kind of putting a lot of pressure on Nick. And if you don't know what to do, then hand fighting is a great option. So let's look at this sequence here where we look for an arm drag and then Nick frames with that right arm and looks to push us away. You can see here that Nick has squared up his stance as a result of pulling his arm backwards. So whenever you look for an arm drag here, you can be ready for your partner to pull backwards, and this generally is a very good time to look for a shot for either a double or a single, particularly when the stance is squared up here and we have our left leg forward most of the time. That means with our left leg forward, we'll be shooting with our head to the right of our partner's hips there and looking to change levels, bringing that bottom foot underneath us, or alternatively with a split stance squat, split stance shot style, which would be moving that foot backwards, but we just want to change levels and take a big step forwards with that left foot until we can get roughly on the line of our partner toes before we start reaching for the legs. So you can see that this hand fighting is good and it's just keeping our partner tied up. We're looking for the inside position and then we try and change levels and shoot here. A relatively easy for our partner to sprawl on us. So let's have a look at this shot a little bit closer. You can see that we change levels well, but we haven't penetration stepped. So that means that we're kind of stuck with our weight on our right foot here and we're unable to take that step forwards that we need to with our lead foot. And we need to take that step forward so that we can get our hips a little bit more underneath our shoulders, and instead of reaching for the legs there, we'll be able to make contact with our partner with either our shoulder or our chest, and then we can start reaching for the legs. So in this instance, we end up getting sprawled on and our partner starting to attack a front head. And now we're doing a good job at staying square with our partner, which is a good thing to do against most front head attacks. So we're circling away here, trying to fight the hands, and then recognizing that the legs are a little bit too close, and we're starting to do a good job at reaching forwards. And it might not be an easy shot to finish, but reaching for the legs can just make your partner sprawl backwards again and give us more time to perform sucker drags or hand fight and stand back up again. So here, this is a good example of getting our hips back underneath us and being able to use that connection that we gained on the legs to pull our hips in towards us. So we've gone from a sprawled out posture where our body was horizontal. So once we knee walk forwards a little bit here, we've got our shoulders up a little bit further above our hips, allowing us to get a better grip here and potentially start looking to finish this double leg. So we could also do that by stepping up on our foot and driving our knee through, but this is a good example of just getting your hips back underneath you when we have contact with the legs. Now we've flattened our partner out and we're looking to pass around with this body lock style grip or this kind of double leg style grip. So we've done a good job of flattening our partner out here. Excellent job beating that bottom knee. And now our elbow and hips connected are doing a very good job of preventing both the knee elbow escape and the hip escape. So always trying to control your partner's hips whenever we land in side control there. And now we're doing the same thing with that left elbow and our hip, controlling our partner's hips there before we try and climb up the upper body here. And we're just reaching a little bit for the head, which isn't necessarily a bad idea, particularly if we can stuff that top arm down towards his chest here. But when we're in this switch-based position, I would say that it is a very good position for us to use our right hand here on the inside elbow of Nick. So Nick with his left arm is using his elbow against his hip and his forearm out at a right angles there so that he can frame against our hips. So our right hand should be able to either pick up the elbow or to potentially pummel for an underhook. Alternatively, we could look to stuff his hand in towards the middle there. But generally, when we are attacking from side control, the inside frame is the one that we should worry about the most. So here, trying to hand fight is good. We're hand fighting the top arm, not a bad idea. That might let us roll our chest over the top of that arm there. And then I wouldn't want to lift my hips up here in that case. So once we stuff that hand in front of our chest, we could keep it there. We can stay on our left hip there. But then without Nick's right forearm in front of our chest, that means we can get to a good crossface and then figure out how to beat this inside elbow. So here we've kind of stuffed his arm almost into an underhook position and we're forced to try and pin him down there. So looking towards a front head position is good whenever somebody's turtling in towards you. And now we kind of stop in this weird spot. There are lots of weird spots in jiu-jitsu, but this is definitely one of them. And I would say that the same thing that Andreas did to Nick before, Nick is able to do Andreas, where he might be able to reach out and grab the legs. Obviously, his arms are a little bit stuck here, but with some hand fighting, those legs are definitely within reach. So Andreas is doing a good job at trying to get into this space between the hip and the armpit, but with Nick's elbow so close towards his hips in very good defensive turtle positioning, it does mean that the neck will be exposed here. So most of the time in a position like this, when I'm looking to hold somebody down or attack from the turtle position in a north-south orientation, I would use my right hand on the chin strap and my left hand on the tricep and try and tripod up a little bit so that we have pressure down on the back of our partner's shoulders, keeping their weight kind of stuck on their heels there. But we're looking for this inside space here, definitely vulnerable to a double leg here or a single leg. And then looks like we're not sure exactly what to do, but we have good chest to back connection until we don't right about here. So you can see that instead of our chest being over the top of our partner's back with good downwards pressure, we're now kind of towards that rear hip a little bit, which is allowing Nick to find some space to potentially roll out towards a guard. But we do have that arm over the back, which is stopping Nick from getting all the way back to an open guard. Instead, we end up here in this kind of chest-to-chest spot. So a couple of things here. Number one, like I said, I would attack a front head position so that we can attack with a chin strap and a tricep control. And that often means that we'll be able to use our left hand on the far tricep over here to get either our right knee or our left knee into this gap on the far side between the armpit and the hip. And then that can help us solidify that connection we have to our partner's back as we circle around behind them. So here, Nick does a good job at trying to get back to guard here. And Andreas is doing the right thing, putting pressure on, trying to keep those feet beaten, and trying to use good downward pressure to collapse these frames. And now we end up in a nice chest-to-chest position. I'll just point out one thing here that Andreas does really well. You can see that this upper arm frame or the forearm frame is on the neck here. And what Andreas does, maybe even subconsciously, is by moving his head to the other side here. So you can see he kind of wears on that frame, drives Nick's elbow up and away from his body so the forearm's kind of over his head. And then Andreas does a really nice job at switching that head to the other side to almost beat the frame, but just gain some more chest to chest connection here. So now we're looking to pass around the outside, and this is the spot where Nick should be able to reverse us because our shoulder is on the outside. And what I mean by that is once we've started coming around the outside here, this is kind of a Nicky Rod style body lock. So if we go back to a position like this, we're basically body lock passing here, and but with our hands a little bit lower than we would typically have them in a body lock. And we have that shin of Nick's across our hips. So we're going to be trying to bring our right knee in towards the hip, which is a completely valid option. Another option, and probably my preferred way of body lock passing, is to bring this left knee over the top of the shin or around the end of the foot there, so that we're forcing a half guard position. Because their knee shield will be on the outside here, we should have a good chance at figuring out our near side underhook or our crossface and far side underhook, and then being able to bring this right knee into the hip and control our partner a little bit more. Whereas when we try and hop up on our toes and move around the guard very quickly and athletically, this is a good style of body lock passing, and Nicky Rod is exceptionally good at that, but we often end up in a position like this, where our partner is able to turn towards us and get their back off the mat. And then we need to have some good wrestling knowledge to consolidate this position. So one of the things that we can look to try and do is put our partners back onto the mat. And the way that we would do that is by moving this right shoulder, which is now on the outside, to back into the inside here, basically in the middle of Nick's body there. And what that will let us do is add some pressure in this direction to force his back to the mat. And we can also, because we had kind of more like a double leg style grip instead of a body lock style grip, we can start lifting our partner's knees up in the air so that his knees will go up and his body will go down. And then we can potentially step over the legs towards some Khabib style mount attacks or smash pass variations, but we really need our shoulder on the inside of the body here to keep our partner down. So Nick does a very good job of keeping that shoulder beaten, and he's using the tight waist to kind of consolidate that position. And then this is a good little knee block and roll through to at least some kind of scramble position. So as soon as this is happening, Andreas is doing a good job at reaching back, attempting to crossface. He's also building a lot of height here with his head and shoulders, which is going to help him land in this top position and potentially step over to mount. So if you're not sure what to do, then building height is a very good idea. But one other idea that we can look at in this position is when Nick goes to hip bump sweep us, sometimes, or get back to some kind of cat dog or octopus variation, sometimes what is difficult is to reach back for this crossface, and it may not be the most effective way to put our partner back down to the mat, because we're often still vulnerable to hip bump sweeps, even if we have reached back for the crossface. So what we could try and do is bring this right elbow in between our body and his body so that we can pummel to an underhook in this position. So a little bit difficult to see from this spot, but if we look here, as soon as that big bump happens, we're reaching back for the crossface, we could potentially pummel that right elbow inside. But building height is always a good thing to do if you're not sure what to do in a scramble, and stepping over the legs is a very good way of putting a stop to that seesawing motion that people can get really good at with the octopus guards and cat dog variations. So in general, stepping over the legs is a good thing to do in one of those situations. And here we end up back in a half guard chest to chest position. We're controlling the head well. We can look to get that underhook, which Andreas has done a good job at doing. And then now here we're looking to pass. So it looks like we have a nice flattened out opponent, which is what we should be trying to do most of the time. We're in a half guard chest to chest position, but there could be some improvements made with this crossface and the positioning of our underhook to prevent things like this happening. So if we go back towards this half guard chest to chest position, then we can see that we have a crossface, but our partner's chin is relatively vertical and looking upwards. So what we could do is use our left hand underneath the shoulder to pull Nick's shoulder up off the mat so that we can punch this left hand through of ours a little bit deeper and go palm up with a deep grip underneath their shoulder. That way we can move our shoulder towards our little finger, and we can really put some good choking pressure on with this crossface. The other part of setting a crossface is pulling our partner's head off the center line. So sometimes our left knee will need to be moved back a little bit to give us some more room to move their knee, or sometimes we can use our left knee near the hip. But you can see that Nick's spine is relatively in a straight line and is looking up. So anytime you're in a half guard chest to chest position with a crossface and a far side underhook, always look to set that crossface to turn it from an inconvenience into a real problem. And now with the far side underhook here, our partner's elbow is still well underneath their shoulder line. So almost always before I start trying to pass a half guard position, I would be trying to keep my elbow in close towards the armpit and walk this right hand up so that we can get his elbow up much higher above his shoulder line there. And we can also then start putting our head forwards on the mat, kind of above the shoulder here somewhere, so that we can make this frame in front of the neck relatively ineffective. But you can see here with our head up and our partner's right forearm in our hip there, that means when we start looking to build height here, we are vulnerable to being swept over. But something that we can think about here is whenever somebody bridges from the bottom of a half guard position, if they do a powerful bridge, they almost always need to open their guard. So obviously this would be easier if we had really good upper body control using a crossface and a more established underhook, but our partner still has to open their legs to bridge here, right? See how the legs are open. So if you look at some of Marcelo Garcia's rolls, I mean, he is just an expert at timing this step to mount. So if you're doing a good job at passing half guard, you know that your partner has to make a big bridge, then just be ready to step that leg to mount, potentially post with our right hand, but often that is going to end up in a good position to us. So Nick does an excellent job reversing us, and you can see that we've kind of extended our arms here, essentially removing some of our frames. So as soon as you find yourself on the bottom, in general, we want our elbows close to our ribs and trying to get as many arms and legs in between our partner and ourselves as possible, rather than extending our arms here. You see that this right elbow with the inside frame here, we're kind of extending our elbow into the hip. I think preferably we would keep that right elbow a little bit closer to our ribs there, and then looking to use that right forearm or a little bit closer to the wrist in the hip there, so that we can start thinking about connecting our bottom knee and elbow without the same amount of risk in terms of our partner beating that inside elbow position, which it looks like Nick is walking towards the hips now in hope of doing that. So here we do a good job at turning onto our side, but our partner has the far side underhook, making it very difficult for us to get all the way on our hip, and any kind of guard retention or guard recovery from here will be difficult. So in a position like this, when our left hand is on the outside, you can see that Andreas is doing a good job at extending this arm. And what that does is move Nick's head towards the middle and changes the orientation of his body from a crossbody position where our bodies are at a T to a little bit more of our bodies being on the same line. And when we use this outside hand, often they will be forced to let go of the crossface to start posting a hand on the mat. This is a good opportunity to use our right hand and take advantage of this space that we've created between our hips to pummel our right hand to in front of the body and towards Nick's far hip here. So when we have our right forearm against the hip, that means that we can kind of keep Nick's hips where they are, and then look to swing our legs all the way over in this direction and slip our elbow and come up towards a turtle position. So that would be called the ghost escape, and it's a good option. It's difficult to completely clear this elbow position, but with a good pendulum, we can often turn all the way onto our other hip there, rather than continuing to turn towards our partner, where it's going to be difficult to get our frames back in. And you can see here, we do a good job of bringing that hand back in front of the face, but that right elbow is again a little bit extended here. And now our elbows are away from our body. So doing a good job at trying to connect the knee and the elbow here, penduluming our legs, which is often a good alternative to the bridge because we don't allow our partner to get a tight waist. But now we're starting to turn on our side a little bit here, which is not a bad idea. But yeah, I'd say the main improvement that could be made defensively here is just keeping those elbows a little bit closer towards the ribs. This video is from a while ago, so Andreas has definitely made those improvements. But here, good job by Nick collecting that far armpit. And you can see the difference in like a white belt versus blue belt in terms of just not rushing this position, threatening a little bit of a knee on belly, seeing if there are opportunities to get inside that inside frame position, keeping that knee down next to the head, prioritizing that far side underhook, and then taking advantage of a big reaction to end up catching the armbar in a position with that far side armbar control. So nicely done by Nick to weather that storm. Some really good top position from Andreas there, and hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.